we have had romance scams, and going back to, I can't cite a specific case, I remember it, but I can't pull it in the file because it's just one of those things we dealt with. But it was a case in Wyoming, and unfortunately it wasn't just the person who was being the romance that was hurt, it was her mother. She was power of attorney for her mother, and the mother had the money, and she got hooked up with a person in Nigeria and started exchanging. I believe they met on a chat room. It wasn't through a dating site or anything along those lines, but they established a relationship. And just like you were saying, suddenly all of a sudden he's asking for money because he wants to come visit. He wants to come visit her, he wants to build a relationship, they want to get married, you know, the whole 9 yards. But to do that, he needed money. He didn't have enough money to come to America from where he was. And so what she did was steal from her mother. She had the power of attorney and took the money out of the mom's bank account to then send it to this guy who obviously never showed up. He never came to Grand Rapids to fulfill that. So it's great to raise awareness about romance scams, but I think people should be aware of all kinds of scams, all over the internet, all over computers, whether it be, you know, through the traditional dating sites, whether it be, you know, your eBay, Craigslist, and all kinds of stuff like that. Anything over the computer, there is that inherent risk, and it's a dangerous world out there, so you really got to be careful and watch yourself out there.
One of the things that I encounter in my practice is people that are concerned about either a parent or an elderly parent, or it's the elderly person himself, and they're kind of questioning the relationship, and they're looking for some advice, some thoughts from an independent person as to what might be going on and how I should be reacting to this. So the stories that I would have are of people that are already involved in the scam, and maybe somebody's kind of alerted somebody and we're trying to get some additional insight to it. And the two things that I have learned in working with many folks who have been the victim of the scammers is the use of secret. The use of secret really bonds the scammer to the victim. And the scammer will say to the victim, you know, let's just keep this between the two of us. Let's not talk about our relationship to others, because if other people find out, they might disapprove. And there's, of course, great truth to that. If family members or people on the friendship network would hear about these stories, they might warn them away and say, you shouldn't be doing that. And so there's a lot of truth to the scammer saying, if you talk about our relationship with other people, they might be skeptical. And what we have is very special, and I don't want that to end. So let's just keep this a secret. And so the person hears that, and I think there's kind of an intuitive thought that, yeah, if I start talking about this romance to my adult children or to other friends, they're going to say, that sounds kind of screwy. And so intuitively, they know that maybe this isn't something they should talk about. So they agree to keep the secret, and the secret really bonds these two people together. It makes it much more difficult for the victim to get help. The second thing that I'm realizing, listening to many of these stories, is the people who are victimized, particularly our older adults, are very afraid to tell anyone because there's this concern that once we know that the senior adult is making bad decisions, their fear is the family is going to say, see, you can't live by yourself. You need help. You need to go into a facility where people can keep an eye on you. And so our elderly citizens who are victims of these scams are very hesitant to report because they know that as soon as it becomes aware that they've made some bad choices, they know family members are quick to say you can't live by yourself.
Something that I see is people try to ingratiate themselves to a senior, whether it's romantically or just to strike up a good friendship. And in that, before you know, they're taking over bank accounts, spending lots of time with the person, whether in person or by phone. Like Beth said, they like to keep it a secret and really encourage isolation of that senior. I had a woman the other day who had an 80-year-old mom with a 50-year-old boyfriend. And this boyfriend quickly moved into the home, took over the bank accounts, got his name on just about everything, and was keeping mom very isolated from her adult children. You also hear about obituary scams where people will read the local obituary and call the widow or widower and it's a long lost grade school friend or it's a war buddy, and try to again ingratiate themselves, create a friendship, and move in to take over that person's finances.
Nancy had mentioned that many people are embarrassed when they are a victim of one of these scams. They tend not to report it. I'd like to encourage anyone out there, if you were a victim, to please do report it. BBB has a platform online called BBB Scam Tracker, and we collect information on scams targeting West Michigan or elsewhere as well. You can report the information, and you can report it anonymously if you'd like, and then at least the information is reviewed here, and if it's something we can work on as a scam, we certainly will. At least we can collect the data, and then other people can see that as well.
What can your office do about a Nigerian who's scamming a person in Grand Rapids, Michigan? You don't have a Nigerian office.
Did I be there in February? That's sure, yeah. You're right. There's not, even the U.S. Attorney's Office can't necessarily do it. The one case we could get involved in, we could go after the daughter for taking money from the grandma. But could we get to the individual who's in Nigeria? No. What we do is pass that along to the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office, because they do start building cases. They start taking reports and trying to match things up, and they can move to hopefully shut them down or maybe even prosecute down the road. But it's a very difficult challenge to try and get somebody overseas or even track who exactly is doing it, because they move around. They don't have a set IP address. This is going on all over the place. So in terms of holding people accountable, yeah, it's very difficult.
Why is it Nigeria?
And that's a good question. I can't, it's just a base of operations, not a whole lot of government involvement, and they can kind of pull this stuff off. And yeah, and Nigeria is the traditional, but it comes from all over. Russia, we've had cases, I've been aware of that, from Europe, various countries in Europe, so it doesn't necessarily have to be Nigeria. That just seems to be the traditional. I think just about everybody here can probably say they've got the email from a Nigerian national who wants you to send them $1,000. That just seems to be what they've hinged on. Why that is, I'm not quite sure.
Do you guys track how many romance scams that come to your desk, and how do you have numbers as to how big of a problem this is, at least in Kent County? Is that something?
The Scam Tracker is probably our most effective tool for that, because it's not a business like the typical Better Business Bureau complaint is a business that there's an interaction with a consumer, and then we get involved to help solve a dispute. These are scams, and that's why we invented Scam Tracker on a national system. And if you go to the website, you will actually see where the scams are, and if you click on our area in West Michigan, you'll see how many scams are active right now and what they are. They'll describe them and explain how the scam works. So we have not quantified how many romance scams there are in West Michigan, but I can just tell you that every time I've gone out to speak to a senior citizen group or listen on the phones to the people who are talking on the phone, it's so prevalent. And sometimes it doesn't even have to be romance, it can just be company. I've heard stories of financial planners that are a little unscrupulous, that they just build relationships with these people who've got a lot of money, and next thing you know, they're in control of the whole estate. And the rest of the family's going, what in the heck just happened here?
How often are people who are doing this actually charged criminally?
It seems to me it's fairly infrequent, and it's because it's so difficult. Whether it's a romance scam or a tech scam, you name it, these international situations are extremely fraught with problems of ever tracking them down. You need to track down the perpetrators. You have to have the collaboration of the government, which may or may not be willing to help you. And it's really a difficult situation. So it just seems like once or twice a year there'll finally be a big bust, whether it's a tech scam or a puppy scam or a romance scam or whatever. But boy, it seems like they go on and on and on.
I think we probably do more than we think, just because we don't have a charge of scam. We'll charge you, could be an armed robbery. We've had how many cases we covered where somebody goes on Craigslist and shows them somebody's house and they pull a gun. And there's a scam, but we don't report it as a scam. We report it as an armed robbery. It's a vulnerable adult abuse. It's a larceny of building. So we don't have a scam charge. There's a bunch of different scams that we charge, but and I can't look up in our computer system and pick out, okay, that larceny from a person was really a scam and a romance scam. So that's what makes it difficult.
Yeah.
A couple of things. Number one, the importance of what the BBB is doing today, because it's about prevention. So many of us become involved at the back end of things, and there's so little that you can do. So it's really important, and we thank you for getting this word out, because prevention is going to be the best way moving forward. And the second thing is, again, it's sort of the tip of the iceberg. You have your cases, I hear my stories, Nancy, you all hear your stories, and the reality is we're only hearing the tip of the iceberg, because there are so many folks who are impacted by these romance robberies and these scams. But like we were saying earlier, they're ashamed. They feel so betrayed. They're so angry, and they're so fearful of reporting it, because just like with children and child abuse, you can't control where that story goes once you start telling either your adult children or you start telling the authorities. And because they're afraid of, again, those possible consequences of losing their independence, that shuts them down. And that's maybe a reason why they might confide in us, because they're hoping that they can talk about their story and maybe get some help without exposing it to people who will take the kind of consequences they're afraid of.
Of the 5 of you, have any of you ever investigated a romance scam and found out that this is love, this is genuine, that that this is not a scam?
Because they've come to me in terms of looking for help, I would say no.
I mean, to some extent, some of the vulnerable adult cases we'll get from, the kids who say dad's got so-and-so moved in with them and she's a bad influence, but dad's competent, dad knows what he's doing, and dad is in love. Now, whether she's truly in love with him and just living off his money is one thing, but there's a number of cases we've declined to prosecute because the adult is fully competent and is maybe making bad decisions who he's living with, and she's probably getting scammed, but he's truly in love, and he has a right to make bad decisions. So there are cases like that.
What's the best way to try to prevent this from happening?
Taking a little bit of time to analyze the situation. I think the reason they found those commonalities in victims of romance scams is that they tend to romanticize and they tend to overestimate the qualities of the individual that they love. You have to find some way, and usually it's through a third party, I think, a loved one that can help you back in off the ledge from making a very poor decision. Because if you allow your emotions to take over, any one of us is going to make horrible decisions because we're not thinking through the implications of the actions we're going to take.